What if I told you that one woman, armed with nothing but the truth and a borrowed flash drive, brought down an entire network of corrupt judges, bent coppers, and millionaire criminals? What if that same woman had been dragged through the streets on a lead like an animal just weeks before she walked into court and destroyed their lives forever? This is the story of Maya, and trust me, by the end of this, you'll never look at the justice system the same way again. Right? This story is absolutely mental, so grab a brew and settle in, because what you about to hear will properly blow your mind. Picture this: a gray, drizzly morning in Atlanta, Georgia. A part-time waitress and cleaner walks up the marble steps of Fulton County Courthouse. She's wearing her simple work clothes, clutching a battered folder and a handbag that's seen better days. Her hands are shaking slightly, and you can see the exhaustion in her eyes from weeks of sleepless nights. But here's the thing. Maya isn't walking into that courthouse as a victim anymore. She's walking in as a woman on a mission to tear down an empire. Let me take you back 6 weeks to understand just how this all started. Maya was cleaning the kitchen of a retired police chief's house. Nothing unusual there, just another cleaning job to make ends meet. The chief's wife happened to be a county judge, and they were hosting their spoiled nephew, Tyler, a wealthy young man who'd been raised to believe the world owed him everything. Now, Tyler was the sort of person who'd never heard the word no in his entire privileged life. When Maya accidentally spilled a drink while serving, instead of saying no worries like a normal human being, this absolute weapon starts screaming at her like she'd burnt his house down. Within minutes, and I mean minutes, the judge herself rocks up with 2 off-duty police officers, all of them wearing these cruel smiles like they'd been waiting for an excuse to have some fun. They accused Maya of theft. No evidence, no proof. Just 3 powerful people deciding that this working-class woman must have stolen something because, well, why not? When Maya tried to defend herself, as any reasonable person would, Tyler came out with something so sick, it still makes my blood boil. He dared her to prove her innocence by crawling across the living room floor like a dog. The officers laughed. The judge nodded approvingly. And then one of them actually pulled a dog leg from a closet and clipped it around Maya's neck. They dragged her outside into the pouring rain, in front of the neighbors, cameras flashing, people laughing, treating a human being like an animal for their own twisted entertainment. But it gets worse. When Maya tried to report this abuse to the police, they mocked her and told her the judge had already filed charges claiming Maya had attacked Tyler and resisted arrest. Can you imagine? The very people who were supposed to protect her had turned the story completely upside down. She was now facing criminal charges for being the victim of their sadistic game. Now, most people would have crumbled. Most people would have accepted a plea deal, kept their heads down, and tried to move on. But Maya wasn't most people. She spent the next 6 weeks becoming a one-woman investigation unit. She tracked down witnesses. She dug into the judge's past cases. She uncovered a web of corruption involving the police chief. She even convinced a former court clerk, now turned whistleblower, to speak out. By the time she walked back into that courthouse, she wasn't the same broken woman they'd humiliated. She was armed with evidence that would bring their entire world crashing down. The morning of the trial, Maya walked into that courtroom and every single pair of eyes followed her. The defense table sat empty because she decided to represent herself. No lawyer in the city would dare take on both a sitting judge and a police chief. The judge looked down at her with that same smirk that had haunted Maya's nightmares for weeks. But this time Maya stared right back. It's no fear, no backing down. She placed her folder on the table and started pulling out papers, photographs, and a small black flash drive. The whispers started immediately as people noticed the mountain of evidence she'd brought. The prosecution opened with their pack of lies, painting Maya as some violent thief who'd attacked poor innocent Tyler for no reason. But Maya just stood there, letting them dig their own graves with every false word. When it was her turn to speak, she walked to the center of that courtroom, holding a single photograph. She raised it high enough for the jury to see. It was the image of her in that front garden, lead around her neck, rain pouring down, whilst the judge and officers stood nearby laughing. The room went dead silent. The judge started banging her gavel, ordering the jury to ignore the photo, claiming it was fake. Maya pulled out 3 more pictures from different angles, with timestamps and weather reports proving they were genuine. The gasps got louder. The judge's face went white. The officers started shifting uncomfortably. Then Maya held up that flash drive and told the court it contained recorded phone calls between the judge and the police chief discussing how to destroy her reputation. The voices filled the courtroom, cold, calculating, absolutely dripping with malice as they plotted against an innocent woman. The judge was banging her gavel frantically, demanding the recording be stopped, but it was too late. The jury had heard enough. The reporters in the back were scribbling furiously. The prosecution looked like they were about to be sick, but Maya still wasn't finished, not by a long shot. She revealed documents showing the police. Chief had been nicking millions from city projects and funneling the money into a private development company owned by Tyler and his uncle, a company worth over £250 million, built entirely on stolen taxpayer money. With every page she revealed, Maya wasn't just defending herself. She was systematically dismantling an entire criminal empire, brick by brick. The judge called for an immediate break, desperately trying to stop the bleeding. But the truth had already started spreading through those courthouse corridors like wildfire. When court resumed, everything had changed. The jury no longer looked at Maya with suspicion. They looked at her with respect and growing fascination about just how deep this rabbit hole went. Maya called her first witness. Clara, a middle-aged woman who'd once been a cleaner in the judge's home. In a trembling voice, Clara testified that she too had been falsely accused of theft years earlier and forced to sign a confession under threat of imprisonment. Then came a former contractor who'd worked on the police chief's development project. He testified that funds meant for rebuilding storm-damaged neighborhoods had been redirected into luxury flats owned by Tyler, but Maya had saved her biggest bombshell for last. She pulled out a letter from the federal district attorney's office stating they de-opened a criminal investigation into the judge, the police chief, and Tyler. The judge tried to maintain control, but her hands were shaking as she gripped that gavel. Then Maya revealed the most shocking detail of all. The whistleblower court clerk had been threatened at gunpoint by one of the off-duty officers after agreeing to testify. The audio recording played in that courtroom, and the sound of the officer's voice saying, "Do as you're told or you'll disappear forever," sent chills through everyone present. The judge made one final desperate move, announcing that Maya's evidence was inadmissible due to chain of custody issues. But before she could bang that gavel again, the courtroom doors opened. A tall man in a Navy uniform walked in, his presence commanding immediate attention. Maya's eyes widened because she knew exactly who he was. He walked straight to the front and introduced himself as Commander David Carter with the United States Navy Judge Advocate General, Corps. He announced he was there under direct orders to place the presiding judge under federal arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and abuse of power. The courtroom erupted into absolute chaos as federal agents poured in, moving swiftly toward the bench. For the first time since the trial began, Maya saw genuine fear in the judge's eyes. The gavel slipped from the judge's hand and clattered onto the bench as agents read her rights. The prosecution froze, unsure whether to stand in defiance or quietly retreat. The officers who de-laughed at Maya that rainy day sat rigid in their chairs as agents approached them too. Maya stood motionless for a moment, then slowly exhaled as weeks of fear and anger lifted from her shoulders. Outside the courthouse, news crews swarmed the steps as the story exploded across headlines worldwide. Within days, bank accounts were frozen, properties seized, and that £250 million empire crumbled overnight. Tyler's luxury cars were towed away. Family name that had once commanded fear now drew only shame and ridicule. Maya was offered witness protection, but refused, choosing instead to rebuild her life on her own terms. The same courtroom where she'd been mocked became the place where the judge heard her own sentence read aloud. Months later, Maya walked past that courthouse on a bright morning, her head held high. Knowing the building that had once symbolized her humiliation was now a monument to her victory. When a reporter asked what message she had for others facing injustice, she paused and said simply, "They can only take your dignity if you let them." This story absolutely floors me, because it shows what one person can achieve when they refuse to be silently destroyed by corrupt power. Maya didn't have money, connections, or a fancy legal team. She had something far more powerful: the truth and the courage to use it. Think about how many people must have suffered under this corrupt network before Maya said enough. How many other victims stayed silent because they believed they had no chance against such powerful enemies? But Maya proved that even the most entrenched corruption can be brought down by one person who refuses to give up. She turned her humiliation into ammunition and her pain into power. If this story's inspired you, then smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that justice is still possible. Hit subscribe for more stories that prove ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they stand up for what's right. Drop a comment below. Have you ever faced corruption or abuse of power? How did you handle it? Your stories matter, and they might inspire someone else to find their courage. Remember, the system only works when people like Maya refuse to let it fail. Sometimes the most unlikely person becomes the hero we all need. Till next time, keep fighting the good fight, keep believing in justice. And never underestimate the power of one person who simply won't give up. Cheers.